the interesting thing about affirmation is there are a lot of things that should not be affirmed.
Right.
Like if a young person's starting to take drugs, we should not affirm that.
Right.
Or if a child's doing something, diving off a cliff into a deep water or shallow water, we shouldn't say, yeah, go for it. We should say, Bill, for God's sake, don't
do it.
Destroy your own life. And so affirmation is not usually, universal affirmation is never right. Yes, the interesting thing is the affirmation element of this is if a child has gender confusion and they're unhappy, everyone has to affirm them. And if you don't affirm them, they'll call you names, they'll say that you're killing children, they'll say all these lies. And so affirmation is in itself is not good. You have to ask, what am I affirming, and will this be harmful or beneficial? And that seems to be forgotten, which is amazing.
In regard to affirming a child in the way that they feel and identify, the problem is that, as we talked about earlier, once you get to the point of taking medication and having these surgeries, the idea that, gender's a spectrum and it might actually change from day to day, the idea of pushing those types of things when really, maybe they're going to turn around and not feel male or female anymore, and maybe they would identify with something else. So to go that far where you're all of a sudden affecting your physical body that based on something that was more subjective, I think that that's incredibly harmful.
Right, and I think that that's something that even the national sex ed standards that are being pushed into New York schools have some confusion because there's some illogical situations here. So for example, right in the introduction to the national sex ed standards, it says that gender is fluid and often changes throughout one's lifetime, especially during adolescence. Now, that might not be an exact quote, but it's very close, pretty close. First of all, gender does not often change, and not during adolescence or at all. Gender does not change.
In the past, at least.
Right.
For the last thousands of years.
It's fixed. But so if that is the belief, if we believe that gender is fluid, and then we're also medically and permanently damaging children's bodies prior to them even being able to drive or vote or drink alcohol or buy a lottery ticket, we have a real problem. We're recognizing that their brain isn't fully developed enough to make rational decisions, yet we're allowing them to make permanent changes to their body and about something that is supposedly fluid.
Right.
So it's illogical.
It is, and basically it's cruel because there's no going back. There's lots and lots of testimonials of people who've had the surgery, it's irreversible, and now they just regard it with all their might. Yeah. And they said, I was just a kid. What did they do to me? And it's and they can come back. They can come back to truth, but they can't return to a normal body or have children because because of the credible cruelty of doing this to children.
I want to make the connection that the way that we view our sexuality and sexual intimacy actually affects our view of gender as well. So one of the things that always surprises me whenever I hear some of the testimonies of adults who struggled with genuine gender dysphoria, they struggled with their identity as either male or female, and when they got older, they did realize, oh no, I have that kind of regret of going through this process. So many of them tell stories about how they were actually sexually abused. Right. They were abused in some way. One woman was telling a story about how she was sexually abused by a man, and so in her mind she kept telling herself, if I was a man, that wouldn't have happened to me. And so there are so many reasons why kids might struggle with their gender and their identity because of something that happened. So
Because of sexual sin.
right. And so the idea that we're now taking something that traditionally started with these horrible things, bringing this impact into a child questioning their identity, that now all of a sudden we're really praising this idea of saying, yeah, sure, be who you want to be. So I think that's really harmful, that we're not paying more attention to the fact that there's sexual sin out there, and the more that we promote anything goes sexuality, the more abuse and the more confusion and chaos we're going to see.
Absolutely. And we're missing out on an opportunity to counsel these young people who have a history of sexual abuse or trauma by affirming them. Like you were saying about affirmation, just blind affirmation is not healthy for that child.
And it's not loving.
It's not loving, right? And, you know, if they have a history of sexual abuse, then we need to be really giving them the counseling that they need. And truth, you know, they need truth and taught to them and spoken to them. And not to mention not just sexual abuse, but there's also these individuals who are identifying as gender nonconforming or transgender have extremely high rates of autism spectrum disorder, depression, and ADHD. So these children need counsel.
Yeah, they definitely need something.
They do.
But they don't need surgery. They need counsel from loving, responsible adults.
I mean, the idea that the Christian worldview sheds light on, no, you are important to God and He loves you, and you
Just
were
as you
made
are.
with a design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is good. It's good to get this out, and it hurts a little bit. But we have a duty to warn parents and children. Amen.